If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show.
Daniel, so great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us about your business.
So I operate Escape and Game of Thrones. We have around just over 40 locations throughout the UK. It's a mixture of kind of franchise and owner operated. So if you go down as far as Hull, they're predominantly operated by the company, and south of that it's too far for me to drive. So we will let the franchisees look after those ones.
Amazing. And so how did you end up in this game?
I suppose it's a bit of a random one. So I've always been, I suppose, a bit of a geek, for want of a better word. One of my friends went and visited Germany on a kind of team building work event. Played an escape room, sent me a text message saying, look at this is the type of geeky stuff you love. So he comes back to Scotland, and we did a quick search to see if there was anything kind of near us, similar. Nothing there. Closest one was Birmingham. So at that point, we got my brother involved, and the three of us went down to have a look. And this place was in the back of beyond. It was a rundown building. It had some of the dodgiest customer service I've ever seen. We went into the room. It was a tiny little room, really poorly lit, in pretty bad nick. And then we solved it. So we were delighted, got out. The owner comes and presents us with an Amazon box, and the box has got a load of bits of paper in it. So we reach our hand in, we win a can of Coke to share between three. Fantastic. Between three. I don't remember who drank it. That was a prize. So, it was a big night out. And then at that point, we left it, and we thought, do you know what? That was excellent. We really enjoyed that. So for all the things that were wrong, we thought, do you know what? That's a solid business model. Yeah. And if you did something to a good level with that, it's kind of at the core, then you'd have a great business.
So you weren't in business before though,
no,
right?
At that point I was studying to be a maths teacher. So the biggest escape you've ever seen. But yeah, so I was back at University of Stirling. I was in my third year, I think, and I was due to finish up in the May. I think I had a placement. I think it was at Barberton. I could be remembering incorrectly, but I was still due to do a year of teaching. And I did my exam. 2 days later, we opened Escape. And the idea being that if it went well over the summer, we'd carry it on. And if not, I would be teaching. So
the first escape room was where?
In Edinburgh.
Yes.
Yeah, so St Colm Street. So
yeah, it was.
That venue's closed now, but we took that on in the April of 2014, and it was open by the tail end of May. Right. So that was pretty exciting.
So you turned it around quickly then?
Yeah, well, we were in a bit of panic mode because at that point we'd seen that there was no other escape rooms in Scotland, so we were going to be the first escape room in Scotland. But then a search indicated there was another one coming soon in Edinburgh. And so at that point we'd signed the lease, and then we were incredibly nervous because we're like, we've got this great idea, and we had no idea what the market would look like. So when you saw that there was going to be a competitor from the off, then that was a bit nerve-wracking. But that competitor's now, we managed to buy them 5 or 6 years ago. That's one Can You Escape on Holyrood Road. So that's part of our kind of portfolio now.
Ah, nice. And so let me just make sure I've got that correctly then. So were you were going to become a math teacher, but then went down this route here. So had you made the decision at that point, maths isn't for me now, I'm going to just do this, or were you trying to run them two in tandem for a while?
Honestly, I don't think it was that logical.
All right.
I think it was just a case of,
wow,
there was an opportunity and I was going to give it a bash. I think my wife thought I was having a breakdown. She never said at the time, but she has said since that she thought I'd lost the plot. So maybe I had, but it's worked out. So.
And how did you know that there was going to be a market for this then?
Well, they were huge in Asia. Canada and USA had a market. There was 5 or 6. I think there was 5 in England, and they were all booking really well. Even the one in Birmingham that we visited was booking really well. So we thought, well, Edinburgh, something to do, something a bit different. You know, you've got a big tourist market. You've got a big market just at home. If it doesn't do well in Edinburgh, it's going to really struggle anywhere else.
So what were those first like few months like? Because I guess you were like in the shop, right? You were the dude on the microphone, like, you know, so like, talk, you know, what was it like?
Well, this is the reason why you'll see at some escape rooms, they have actors. This is why we do not. Because if you have somebody acting at the start and they don't do it properly, it is the worst thing you've ever seen. My acting skills are right up there with my karaoke. It's not something anybody wants to see. So we were very matter of fact. Having worked in McDonald's, we were all about great service and recruiting people with great service and who were pretty switched on, used to working at high speed. And that fueled it. From there, we started out with, to go back to the original question, the first month we took 400 quid. First month. I remember we got one booking for £132 and it was the most excited I'd been for 10 years, 15 years. The only thing since is Hibs winning the Scottish Cup. That's about it. But we had that first month and then we were kind of a little bit panicked. So me and my brother were working in there. And then we thought, well, we need to do something. So we went on to Groupon. And Groupon was a very different animal back then than it is now. Back then it would pay out on unredeemed vouchers. Whereas now they kind of hold the money back until you enter the codes and blah, blah, blah. And they're now very, well, it doesn't really matter. But we used Groupon and we got 4,000 month 2 and we were busy. Month 3, we then took 20,000. And the reason for this being is that with Groupon, we just used that to get reviews. So what happened was TripAdvisor had never seen escape rooms really. And so the minute this new attraction started getting loads and loads of 5-star reviews, we shot to the top of TripAdvisor. And from that point, you know, the bookings were insane. So we did kind of around about the 20k mark, July and August, and that gave us enough money to open in Glasgow. Same model, we then opened in Newcastle 3 months later. Same model, Dublin, start of 2015. And all of a sudden you've gone from kind of one wee room on the 3rd floor in St Combs Street to you've got 4 locations in 4 major cities that are then turning over. And it was at that point people started taking notice and coming asking to get involved in the business.
And that's when the kind of the franchising part of it started?
So the first one was in New Zealand, of all places. So we worked with a fantastic guy called Bill, and we wanted to get the franchise model right. So we gave Bill a fantastic deal, just explained to him, look, you're the guinea pig. It's like, we are going to make mistakes here, but we're on your side, and 100%, anything you need, we'll support you. And Bill's done really well. He's now got he's got rooms in an old prison in New Zealand. It's fantastic. He's got a great venue. And then from there, it was Dubai was the kind of the next one. And then we started in the UK and farmed out from there.
But wait a minute, so New Zealand and Dubai, so how do they then spot you when you've got locations just in the UK?
Because they were on holiday here.
Okay.
So they came and played and thought, we can take this and go over there. So for instance, now the one in Dubai is closed during the pandemic, but you go over there, I was over there last year and I think there was over 40 locations doing escape rooms, which is mad. So
not dissimilar to how you got involved, because it was your pal who was over in Germany and he told, interesting.
So I think there's something about that, you know, going to different markets and seeing what's working. I mean, we did the same thing with the axe throwing. You know, when we were looking for a business to complement the escape rooms, it was all about looking around and seeing what was performing well elsewhere and trying to replicate getting in at the base level of the market. So that's what we did with escape rooms. We were incredibly lucky with the timing, you know, playing that game and it just all coming together. But with the axe throwing, it's similar. You know, we came in and we've gone from one location to 13 since May 2021. And it was probably brave, stupid decision to start a new venture in the middle of that period, but touch wood, it's worked out.
So that first, then, within a year, you had 4 locations. Did you have a plan? Like, was that the plan?
No.
It was
opportunistic.
Yeah.
I mentioned McDonald's, and I think that's what separated us from the other sites that had opened originally. So, for instance, if you take, Hint Hunt in London was turning over an absolute fortune. I mean, they could have, if they'd gone, right, actually, let's go to Birmingham, let's go to Leeds, let's go to Newcastle, they could have absolutely dominated the market, but they were happy with one location, which probably did really, really well for them. But we just had that kind of McDonald's mentality behind us, where it was, almost like, like you're only like 5 minutes away from a McDonald's wherever you are. It's like maybe there should be like an Escape in every major city, or and it just wasn't it isn't in the company makeup to kind of sit back. It's all about what can we do better, what can we change, about marginal gains, very much about every day you kind of leave it just very slightly better than you did the previous day. I think things like that are kind of pretty important, because you're not going to make massive changes every day. And if you set a huge stretch goal, you wait 6 months before you measure it. But if you know that you've done something that kind of makes a business a little bit better, then I think you can sleep at night.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm just thinking about the conversation that we've had here and just before we started as well. And it's quite, again, tell me where you might go with this, but on one side, you've got kind of what you do. So, you maths is your thing. Escape rooms quite logical in terms of how you solve. McDonald's and systems. There's that structure, and then you've also got, there wasn't really a plan. Your view is just try it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Give it a try, and quite entrepreneurial. So there's almost two things that are almost very different that are operating together. That's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah, I think you've got a third thing on top, because I studied architecture originally. So in terms of the design of the space in the rooms, that all kind of, it's almost like a perfect storm. You've got the design aspect with the architecture. You've got the escape rooms are almost like a lesson plan to keep people engaged for kind of 60 minutes, which nobody wants to hear when it's fun, but that's a framework. And thankfully, I don't design any of the rooms anymore. I've got people far more talented than me for that. But yeah, so I suppose that there is a little bit of that, but I got described as a master improviser 2 weeks ago. We did an event for Hibernian Football Club, and something went massively wrong. And we fixed it, we got through it, it was fine. But one of the guys that works for me says, I've had 2 words to describe you, it'd be master improviser. And I wasn't sure whether that was a positive or a negative. But I think there's definitely something about making decisions quickly.
Yeah.
I think, do you know what? You can muck things up, but as long as you make a decision quickly, then you can rectify it in reasonable time. Obviously not massive company strategy decisions, but I think sometimes there's a lot of guilt of overanalyzing things, especially when it's your own money. It's you can almost get frozen and analyze things to the state that no decisions get made.
And just out of interest, using that example of Hibs, that's 2 references to Hibs you've given so far, and we're only 10 minutes
There'll be loads more, don't worry. I hope they're listening.
What, in the moment when something goes wrong, if you're a master improviser, how do you deal with that? What's going on?
Again, it's a McDonald's thing. So in that type of restaurant environment, things go wrong all the time, over and over and over. And it's all about putting people in the right places and making quick decisions. Yeah. And I think that sets you up really well. And I suppose if that's trained into you, that's just the way that you operate. And it's very hard to kick habits like that. And you can see that I have to work quite hard to be organised, to work with some of my team, because they don't operate like that. So I can't just go down a route and then make a hard left. And they're like, what is going on here? We were working towards, and sometimes it throws people a bit, because sometimes I do see things and like, that's wrong. We need to change this. I don't know. I don't think that really answers your question. But what does it look? I think sometimes you just have to stand back and think about what's important in the moment. So for instance, if we're doing a room build and it looks like we're struggling to get open. So we did the Escape Room World Championships with Red Bull, and they had this massive design, and we had something like 13 days to build it, but it was equivalent of something like 9 or 10 escape rooms, and it was the most technologically advanced room that we'd ever done. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was amazing. But we didn't design it, so we were having to go back and forth. So we'd custom build, there's a thing called a Belgian lock, and effectively what this was kind of 5 metres by 4 metres, and it was 7 or 8 panels. And what happens if you moved, there was like 5 sticks, 5 things, and if you moved them, the lock would move. So basically you had to move them in the right sequence up and down to open the lock. And it was really complicated, but it looked really complicated, but it was actually very easy to solve. But it was really difficult to build. And we'd already told Red Bull that we couldn't make one of the things. We're like, this just isn't going to work. So we'd made that call early on, but 3 days before the event, they wanted to pull the Belgian lock because we hadn't built it. And I was like, well, and I'd thought at that point we'd kind of cut enough out that we could do it. And I was like, no, we can absolutely do this. And they're like, no, we've seen you struggle with this and this. And at that point I thought, I'm losing the client because they don't think we can do this. And the team could hear them saying, let's not do this. And they're like, thank God, because it was a nightmare. But I was like, no. And then I pulled them all aside and was just like, look, out of all the things we do, we're going to get this perfect. If nothing else is perfect on this build, we're just going to prove to them that we can do it. And we did it in like 4 hours. Really? It just because we'd prefabbed everything, so we'd ordered everything in, and then they just pulled it together, and it was phenomenal. It was a really amazing piece of kit. But that kind of like, we're going to stay here tonight and finish this. And then so when the Red Bull team came in the next day and saw it, it just lifted the whole project. And I think sometimes just a quick decision along those lines and just being convinced that it's the right thing to do will really, really help.
Good leadership that way.
I don't know, like it was Red Bull. You should have seen how much Red Bull I was drinking. I've done about 15,000 steps by 12 in the morning.
Brilliant.
But it was amazing.
And how does the Red Bull thing, I mean, that's, to get that kind of collab with Red Bull, impressive.
Well, so they were looking for, so they do the event, or they were doing it every 2 years until COVID kicked in. So they did 2017, I think it was in Amsterdam. Or was it? It was definitely somewhere in the Netherlands, and they used a company over there. And then 2019, they were looking for someone, came and played our rooms, and I knew they had a couple of guys consulting with them from the UK, and Ken, who was there, had recommended that they speak to me because apparently we're good at improvising. So basically Ken's
Masters,
Ken's words were that we, whatever happens, you'll have an event, and we'll make sure that it will operate. And you know what, we ran, and then so through that, a couple of meetings, and then we started. And the event itself was phenomenal. We ran 71 teams through in one day. It was pretty ridiculous, but it was phenomenal, and the guys were loving it, and it's pretty impressive. The only thing that I'm a little bit gutted with is that we built the final, and it was only played by 2 teams, and then a bunch of social media influencers, whereas I think it should have been open to the public for like 2 weeks post-event, just to let them see something, quite incredible.
And is that something that's going to now become an annual event, or?
No, it's kind of been shelved since then. They haven't picked it up since. But then saying that, we've we've got the room, we've got all the items, and we've just never set it up anywhere. So you never know, it might turn up one day.
All right, okay. Remember, that was my idea.
Yeah, you want a commission on that.
There's no royalties.
So as you then, you get your first 4, year one, you're starting to, work out what's going on. What was the step from, okay, we're just opening all these ourselves? I know you then went kind of international with franchising, but why down the franchising route? Why not keep them all yourself?
I say franchising, it's probably closer to licensing. I think you want people on the ground that care. And I find that, so I did interviews for our Hull manager role last week. So that was a 4.5 hour drive down, 5 or 6 hours on site, and then the same again back. And I don't think that's not something I'd particularly ask people to do. And I think it's far enough. I think if you're operating it, you need to be able to get there and back in a day. So Dublin's great because the flight is up and down, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then further south, places like London, you want somebody invested in there every day. So I think just having that level of somebody that cares about it on the ground is probably better than it being in your own pocket and having to worry about it at that distance.
And how have you adapted them to the kind of the franchising thing? Is it a one size fits all support, or what's the?
No, it's very difficult because the people that were coming to us at the start were either very business focused and knew nothing about escape rooms, or the other way around. They had all these great ideas, really creative people, but they were kind of needed support on the business side. So you need to wear different hats to support different people. And that's, I found, on a personal level, that was a bit of a challenge, because you initially think, I'll just give them all these systems, give them a bit of training. I know what I found incredibly difficult was setting up barriers. So because we're supposed to be providing a service, if somebody messages you at 9 o'clock at night and it'll only take you 2 minutes to fix, then your immediate response is, I'll fix this right now. But what happens is that then opens the door for the message in a couple of weeks. It comes at 9 o'clock. It takes 3 hours to fix. So I've had to become a bit more disciplined with not responding as quickly and kind of setting boundaries. That was the biggest challenge for me, as opposed to the different roles, more the boundaries and how to manage and support the franchisees effectively.
Yeah. And again, just obviously you've got a mix there of managed estate and franchised estate as well. So is there any crossover? Do the managers of the managed estate ever speak to the franchisees, and do you get everyone together?
We haven't got everyone together for a while, but there is a bit of crossover because there's people within the ecosystem who are much better at supporting on various issues. Like, for instance, if you need support on axe throwing, then you would be much better speaking to my brother Stuart, who's down in Newcastle, because he's really good at it. I'm probably the worst in the company when it comes to the axe throwing. My girls beat me on a regular basis. So, but yeah, so I probably shouldn't say that as an axe throwing coach, but there we go. But I think what I really like is to be able to take people from within my group and get them to support the franchisees, because it makes it larger. And it also means that when something's brought to me, it's because somebody else has tried to fix it and hasn't been able to. And then so that I'm only dealing with things that nobody else can fix, if that makes sense. And then the small fixes all get addressed elsewhere.
You happen to be a lot of things as well, because you've got the business side, you've got then the room design side, you've then got the actual physical build side. So you've got like a whole bunch of different technical people within the team. What's it been like having, that kind of blend of different folk with different talents? You've got joiners and you got, probably there's how do you find like that gels as you've kind of grown the team?
It's difficult. I mean, it's effectively multiple businesses within within the one business. The construction side of things and stuff, so I mean, I took a bit of a step back from the operations of Escape because there was so much going on. So I had Phil, who was our operations manager, who was fantastic. He looked after things for kind of the last 18 months or so, just to get a bit of impetus in post-COVID. But now he's focusing on, we've just picked up a contract with Butlins, which is essentially 18 rooms. So we're looking at that. We've done work with centre parks. So the most difficult thing is managing I suppose not managing down and managing our teams, but managing the relationship with these bigger companies, because what you find is they might have 15 people working on the project, and you'll end up in 4 or 5 different meetings saying the same things over and over. And I always remember looking at invoices and seeing project management on it and thinking, what am I actually paying for here? Whereas now I'm thinking, I've missed a line off my invoice. But it's interesting how much reassurance that these bigger businesses require. Whereas if you work with somebody smaller, it's a case of they pay you X amount, you build Y, everybody checks, there's a bit of snagging, and then you go about your day. And it's not as simple as that once you scale it up.
Yeah. And jumping around a little bit, tell us about the van.
Well, the van is effectively why we decided to kind of add more strings to our bow, because it's such a fantastic business model. So I presume you both drive. Have you ever been to an auction?
No.
No, right. So we decided we'd go and buy a van, and we thought the auctions was the place for it. So you've got repossessed vans. So if something's been abandoned, if a van has been abandoned, then it gets impounded and taken away and sold at auction. But they don't have the keys for it, so you don't know if it works or not. So we go around, have a look, find one that we think looks pretty good, looks in pretty good nick, and we buy it. 400 quid, nailed it. So we think this is great. So we go out and have a look. There's no keys for it, but that's fine. The auction house have a locksmith you can use. So we phone the locksmith, comes out another 150 quid. We've got keys for the van. Get into the van, looks all right inside, doesn't start. So, bit of a nightmare, but it's all right. The auction house, they've got a mechanic. So we phone the mechanic, he comes, has a look, changes the battery, does a couple of bits and bobs. It doesn't work, it's knackered, we've wasted our money. Like, right, okay, we'll come and they basically said that we need to get rid of it. So like, right, this is a nightmare. So we've got away, had to think about it. Then we get a text message while we're having a coffee at the place across the road. You've got 24 hours to remove the van, or we'll be charging you X amount per day for storage. We're like, oh my word. And then so we phone them, like, well, we've got somebody that can get rid of it for you. So effectively, we ended up spending 1,200 quid to bin a van for the auction house.
Why did you want one in the first place?
Oh, because we need one for moving the props about and the rest of it. So we bought a new one and we just took the hit. But what I thought was, do you know what? That's just a business that has, if they sell you a working van, you go away delighted. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, at least they're going to get a load of money because you're never going back.
So I'm interested to see how you've taken that lesson and built that into your business.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of it's about kind of add-on sales. So escape rooms are very difficult because the customer comes in and then they go in the room and you can't sell them anything while they're in the room. Because you've got no engagement. They're just, it's like at the cinema, they're sat watching a movie, they're involved in it. So when we looked at axe throwing, we looked at things like how would you get add-on sales? So we're bringing out a membership scheme this year. We're going to start competitions. We sell pizzas, we sell drinks. So it's not just, so now what we can do is we can say, right, well, you can come in for cheap axe throwing because we can reduce the price of that because we know they'll spend on other things. And I think the realisation there is you've got a business that is about selling vans, but that's probably not where the profit's made. The profit will be made on all these little things afterwards. It was a bit of a lesson. We felt a bit silly, but
it's a good one.
It was. I know, as lessons go, it's not overly expensive.
Yeah, you'll take it. Yeah.
Well, you've kind of answered one of the questions there was around, what's the level of repeat business that you have across the estate as well? Because to your point, you've, if you've done it once, then how do you get people to come back and do it again? So
yeah, well, I think people tend to visit kind of the average customers once every 4 to 5 months. So if you've got 5 or 6 rooms in a city, you're kind of keeping them engaged for 2.5 to 3 years. I think there's there's a bit of a perception that sometimes you get people who love escape rooms and they'll come and they'll play all your games in no time at all, and then, they'll send messages like, oh, when are you opening a new room? It's very much a minority. If you look at, not that many people can play an escape room in the space of a week. Yeah. So, if you've got a maximum of 6 players and then you've got 8 slots and you're really predominantly busy Friday 4 p.m. to Sunday 4 p.m, sure, you're really not looking at more than 100, 120 people a week. Yeah. Take that into somewhere the size of Edinburgh, add in the tourist market, there's very little need to change rooms. We talked about Holyrood Road. Operation Odyssey has been open since 2015. And it's the same game and it still books. So it's, and it's been upgraded, but it hasn't been completely changed. Yeah. And then other cities where we've opened and we've maybe opened with 2 rooms and the games have been played, it's far more cost effective to open an additional site than it is to rip out one and put another one in. Because it's easier to get the return on investment if it's over a longer period. Yeah. So what we'd find is if we had a place that was doing well, you'd end up with multiple locations. So that's why Edinburgh ended up with 3 or 4. That's why Newcastle ended up with 4 at one point. Hull's got 2. Yep. Where else? And then if you look down at kind of the Essex area, you've got like Basildon, Chelmsford, Colchester. I suppose going across to Suffolk, you've got Ipswich, you've got Walton Pier, and they are all, 30, 40 minutes apart. So that's, I think it's something that's missed in the industry a bit, is that people think they need to change more often than they do. Yeah.
So at what point then, once you, you've got the escape rooms going, you realize, get done over by the auctions, you're then at the point like, okay, well, how do we start kind of upselling? How do you end up at axe throwing?
We got a bit worried, I suppose, as because at the start of COVID, when everything shut down, the kind of levels that we had to go to keep the rooms clean, for obvious reasons, you want to keep people safe, but they were pretty extensive, and it was tough. And so we started looking elsewhere to see what other kind of leisure activities there were. You see that kind of competitive leisure everywhere now. So I think we wanted a business that we could get repeat value out of. We could build a core of kind of loyal customers, because you touched on that already with escape rooms. You're trying to find a new customer every single time. And then the spend cap on, if you've got a 3-room site like Holyrood, the spend cap for one customer is like £65, £66, which is nothing in today's market. So you want something that gives that kind of repeat business and that customer loyalty. So axe throwing was doing really well fabulously well in Canada. It was picking up in the States, and over here there was a couple of venues, but nothing major. So we had a look and decided to go for it. Got 2 of our franchisees involved so that we could work on 4 different markets. Then in May 2021 we opened 4 venues: Plymouth, Chelmsford, Hull and Newcastle. Got it right. And then from there we just monitored how they did for 6 months. After 6 months then we put together another franchise package. We worked really hard on a lot of aspects of the business. So for instance, how to reduce the amount of timber we use. So when we started out, like about 14% of our revenue was going on timber to replace the boards. We've now got that down to just over 3.5% through changing the boards from kind of just planks to being end grain systems, which effectively makes it easier and allows the axe to go in at any angle instead of just vertical. And then we've introduced the champ throw system, which is digital. So that means effectively like Top Golf. So you've got multiple different games that people can play. They've got an app, they can return, they can beat their high scores. And hopefully we'll be able to introduce kind of national competitions and things. But yeah, it was just about, to go back to the question, about finding something that was performing well elsewhere that would complement what we currently do. Yeah.
I was going to say, how many things did you go through before you got there?
Oh, loads. Yeah. Loads. Karaoke rooms, AR darts, VR. We do have a couple of these things down in Newcastle, but it won't be kind of the core of the business. The idea with the bigger Newcastle site is that If you were wanting to franchise, you could come in and say, right, I want one of them, and then we would kind of package together your family entertainment centre.
Thomas, do you see kind of your business being a bricks and mortar business long term as well, or could you see yourself doing stuff that's more online?
Well, we did do online stuff during the pandemic, so we used a system called Telescape that was designed specifically for escape rooms, and effectively what you did is you came in with 360-degree camera and mapped out the rooms, and then you added in puzzles and challenges using Zoom. And so we managed to tick over by providing online escape rooms.
Okay.
I don't think there's a substitute for an in-person experience. Mm-hmm. I think, when you see the beauty of escape rooms is that you see different generations together and celebrating success. Mm-hmm. So you'll get grandparents, parents, grandchildren all together in the same room, doing the same experience and all enjoying it in their own way. I think that's incredibly rare.
That's a very good point, isn't it? Because it brings people together as opposed to being a more solitary thing that you do online. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's finding those activities as well that kind of, I guess there's like a wealth element to it. Like if anyone is your customer, really, other than like young kids, I guess. It's like you open up such a wide door for that.
Just on the young kids thing, 'cause you'd mentioned it earlier on about kind of educational workshops as well. What kind of impact does that have on kids, and what are the kind of the key lessons that typically they would take from?
So we've done a couple of things with schools. So we did one with Noughts Academy, and then we did it was a school in Stirling. I can't remember what school it was, that's terrible. But effectively what the pupils did is they designed an escape room for their fair. We had props and storage. So they did the business from the ground up. They designed the room, they did the marketing posters, they did their booking system, and then they operated the games as well and got people in and generated the revenue, and we lent them the props. But it was it was interesting in terms of they looked at it as not just fun, it was like building a business. And when we spoke to the class, it was all about how you didn't have to go to university. You can start, you can leave, you can start a business, but you need to have a plan, which is ironic, me saying that. But you need to have a plan, and then you need to have an idea, and go about how you're going to get there. As well as understanding what the end goal is. So, they obviously wanted to raise X amount for their fundraising, and so they figured out, they worked that backwards. So, well, if we charge £10 a room, then we need to run 18 rooms over 3 days, and and they did it, and they were fantastic. And it was really interesting to see, especially because I was quite surprised that kids kind of 13, 14, 15 were getting engaged with that type of thing. So no, it's really good.
That was just really a franchisee recruitment thing, wasn't it?
Just a bit forward thinking.
Planning ahead.
That's brilliant.
So talking of planning ahead, you must always have your eyes on the next thing, on the next in countries, and looking at, don't want any trade secrets. But where are you going? What do you see the future for?
Well, we're finishing off the build in Newcastle, which I touched on earlier, which is our first kind of family entertainment centre. So that's going to be Levels Newcastle, LVLS. And that we used to have a board game cafe in Edinburgh, Noughts Coffees. So we're going to have the board game cafe in there, 6 axe throwing lanes, 4 AR darts, a bit of VR, 8 escape rooms, and then hopefully some mini golf as well. So that's probably, I think it's bigger locations and less places is the big thing. We've just we're going to a new property in Glasgow this month. So we'll start kind of construction on that start of February. So that will go from Glasgow being 4 escape rooms to 4 escape rooms and 5 axe throwing lanes. And we're building in Aberdeen as well currently to do the same 4 and 4. So that's where we're going. So it's about getting these major kind of population centres and just putting in bigger places. Because I think if we'd gone back 10 years, instead of taking kind of small venues in many places, because we were a little bit unsure, and there were short-term leases at the point, whereas now you're saying, right, well, I'll commit to 10, 15 years because I know this is going to work for X amount of time. Well, I hope this is going to work.
And out of interest, what's your ideal kind of location then? And what I mean by that is within a, do you want to be in the centre of a city, or do you want to be on the outskirts in a kind of a more of an industrial building? What's your ideal?
So it's changed over the years, because escape rooms were very much destinations. You would find them and then you would travel to play them, because they were so niche and there was so little of them. Whereas now they're everywhere. The axe throwing benefits from being visual. So if you can look in a window and you see people chucking axes about, you think that piques your curiosity. Yeah. So I think city centre, big windows, watch people throw axes. I think that works. It's the most effective advertising for it, I think.
All right, okay.
And so how does alcohol now play a role in this? Because you've probably gone, not that well, maybe. Well, that's a problem, right?
It's my crutch.
That's right. For you personally. No, but, as it grows, it's like you're going from these spaces of, you started in escape rooms with a couple of people, and now you're building entertainment spaces where you're maybe going to have bars, and how does that shift for your mindset of where you want to take the business?
There's two things. So there's some fantastic businesses out there doing similar things to us, but they are predominantly based on the bar element. And I think we want to be a bit more family focused. We always kind of considered our market to be the mass market, that grandparent, the family, the grandparents, parents, children, and I never want to have an environment that people feel uncomfortable bringing their children. So we're very, very careful with the alcohol side of things. We do have a license in Plymouth, so we are trialing that, but it's very limited in terms of number of drinks and all the rest of it. The board game cafe might well be that you can have drinks there, but obviously not at the axe throwing. But then I suppose you can drink at the bowling, and I could probably do a fair bit of damage with a bowling ball, similar to an axe. So I think it's, it's not the drink that's the issue, it's people just behaving safely.
Yeah, I guess it's like the environment that you're trying to create within those spaces says, are you wanting to attract the students who are going to stay there and spend 60 quid at the bar, or are you trying to attract the families that want to spend 60 quid on the activities? It's an interesting choice, because I think for most, I actually don't know, but from a business point of view, like bars work, students spend lots of money at bars. And so it feels like, well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, so I think that's interesting. There's one axe throwing place that I know about that is constantly on voucher to get people in, because their bar spend's so high that the price of the axe throwing is massively reduced for that reason. But on a personal level, I'm not particularly keen to deal with the fallout that drink generally brings. On a financial level, that's maybe a little bit naive, but I kind of think that the business identity would be lost if we focus too much on the drink side of things.
But I think that's really respectable, and that's why I'm saying, I think, to say like, no, this is what we're passionate about. We're passionate about family experiences, actually giving the experience, and rather than that being tainted by the, the potential of like, well, now you better have 4 drinks, otherwise I'm going to make no money on this. I think that's an interesting. So no, I just think it's quite admirable to stay, in that niche.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, with this new venue, then you've got all these new things. It seems like an exciting journey. Through your journey, we always ask everyone, what has been your guiding principle in business?
I think just saying that it's done. I think there's sometimes, I suppose if you look at the kind of diminishing returns on things, I think it's at some point you need to say, if we spend more time on this, or could that time be better spent elsewhere? And I mean, a good example is probably in financial terms is escape rooms. A customer, if you spend only 10 grand on the escape rooms that we did 10 years ago, and you compared them to a 30 grand room now, you'd see a massive difference. But if you ramped that up to 80 or 90 grand, you really, on a customer side, they'd probably rather have 2 more experiences than see a kind of very minor difference there. But I think a lot of the time, in construction, we build things quickly. We finish rooms, and sometimes things aren't perfect. But I think sometimes you need to just accept that it's good enough, it's done, and we move on to the next thing. I mean, what's it they say is perfect's the enemy of good, or there's some saying around that. But I don't like to waste time, and I think if you get to a point where it's good. You can always come back. I mean, I touched on marginal gains earlier.
Yeah.
The rooms a lot of the time are organic. You know, we'll put a new room in and we'll put the exact same puzzles in Peterborough as we will in Edinburgh. But the folk in Peterborough might be mental and totally interact with it in a completely different fashion. And so then the room needs to grow and it needs to change and it needs to update. I mean, there might just be some trick of language that we've missed coming from here down to there, you know, some turn of phrase. It could be anything. Yeah. And so I just think that you constantly need to be getting better. And at some point you say, right, well, that's fine how it is. It will get better in the future, but for now, our time's better spent elsewhere. So I think just it's done and we move on. And, you know, I think the team know that when we say, right, no, that's fine. It is what it is. It's done. Then we move on. That's where we are.
And I think to that point as well, you know, we were talking just earlier there, you know, 2014 you started, and at that point there was nothing. And here we are now, 40 plus sites, going to New Zealand, Riyadh, you said, you know, in a 10-year space. And I think that's incredible. You know, it's a real Edinburgh business success story. So, you know, it's been superb, hasn't it?
Yeah. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, and good luck in the future.
Thanks very much for having me. Pleasure speaking to you both. Thank you.